Well, hello everyone. I'm back and I'm so happy to be here again with Wellness Within and shedding a little light on holiday eating and celebration and really kind of reveling in this season. And so I know that with the holidays, there is so much wrapped around food. Indulging in delicious meals is an essential part of the holiday experience. Food makes us feel good, it connects us with loved ones and friends. Um, and there are endless temptations and tendencies to overindulge in foods you shouldn't be eating. But here's the deal, the holiday is a time for celebration and gratitude. And yes, maybe even a little overindulgence. So we should be eating, drinking, and feeling jolly. This is all part of what make the holidays special. So today I'm going to give you 5 tips for continuing to feel merry and bright while also allowing yourself to fully enjoy those delectable meals. I will also be providing you with some of my favorite ingredient swaps to help make those not so healthy treats a little more nutrient dense. And then my hope is that Stevia will be able to email you guys and you can send her some of your most favorite holiday meals that maybe you feel like are not the most healthy, but you just love them and crave them. And she will send them to me and I will try to put a spin on them to make them a little bit less bad. And so maybe it takes some of that guilt away from indulging. So let me pull up my screen here. Okay. So it was initially titled Healthy Cheats for Holiday Eats um, and Other Tips for Feeling Merry and Bright. But it's more like I'd want to really focus on these tips because we'll get to it, but it's not so much about, trying to eat healthy. It's more about changing your mindset in a way around food and how you're eating during this time. So, sorry about that. Hold on. Let me just pull something up really quick. Am I still sharing my screen or now are you seeing my back screen? Okay. You're just seeing the slide. Okay, great. Sorry. So studies have actually shown that the average person gains anywhere between 0.8 pounds to 3 pounds during the holiday months. So like Thanksgiving to Christmas. Um, this really only becomes a problem when that weight isn't shed before the next holiday season, because then the weight just accumulates each year. So just something to think about there. And I don't know why I'm not seeing my own screen. I apologize. Let me see. There we go. Okay. Um, so I want to talk about 5 tips for feeling merry and bright during this time of year. So firstly, and I know we've covered some of this stuff in some of our other sessions together, but some things to think about are sleep. So sometimes when we have family over or friends or there's more parties, we're out later, we're not prioritizing our sleep. And even if you ate pure junk, but you allowed your body to really rest and regenerate, it really allows for us to detoxify on a cellular level. And so when we're getting that quality sleep and we're getting enough sleep, our body is able to kind of reset. And so one of my tips for you is, even though you're going to be enjoying those parties and having great times and being out late, really try to prioritize your sleep and really aim for like 7 to 9 hours. If that's not feasible every night, maybe you sneak in a nap every once in a while. But one thing you can do if you're feeling kind of off your schedule is to just really prioritize that sleep. Second is staying hydrated. So again, we've talked about this in the past, but the thing about drinking water is, number one, it fills us up. So we are less likely to overeat or overdrink because water is also giving us that sense of fullness. It's also crucial in elimination and detoxification. So it helps, bile flow and moving things out of the system, and it helps to detoxify our cells. So it pulls toxins out of our cells and moves them out of the body. It also prevents food and drink hangovers, because as we know, if we're staying hydrated, we're less likely to imbibe in drinks and too much food. And it also helps to get the nutrients of all this great food that we're eating into the cells. So it's allowing for us to actually utilize all this beautiful food that we're eating. So staying hydrated is a very important one. So next I have balance your plate. And so what I mean by that is I think oftentimes I see people either starting their day out with like a really delectable waffle with syrup. And I'm not saying don't do that, but it's so important to remember that to keep that blood sugar balanced where you're not feeling that major rush and crash from certain foods you're eating, it's so important to make sure you're having ample protein and healthy fats with your meals. So you always want to be cognizant of having the proteins, the fats with the carbohydrate. Because as you'll recall, and we've discussed this in previous webinars, if you've been here with me before, is the proteins and the fats are like big logs on a fire. So as an energy source, they burn low and slow, and they kind of keep with us so that our blood sugar stays nice and steady. We're not having these big peaks and valleys where we're feeling really, energized and then crash. If you're just eating like your waffle with syrup, that is all carbohydrates, which is essentially all glucose, and which is sugar. And so it's revving up in your system, and then your pancreas is going, holy smokes, that's a lot of sugar. Pump out the insulin to get all of this sugar out of the blood. And sometimes when it's so extreme, the pancreas can overcorrect and send too much insulin in and take too much sugar out of the blood. And then that's when you feel the dip, because you're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. And then that prompts the liver to break up glycogen storages to put blood or sugar back into the blood to rebalance. And so then your blood sugar is just like, so when I say balance your plate, always think about, okay, I'm having breakfast. I do want this really good waffle, but maybe I'll have a couple eggs with it or some sausage. And if you don't eat meat, you could have a really clean, some amino acid supplement or something that jives with you, or some really good fats, like maybe put a lot of butter on there or something, a lot of grass-fed butter. So you just want to make sure you're having a balanced plate of all those different macronutrients to really keep your blood sugar steady. Another thing I see people do often around the holidays is they think, oh, you know what? I'm going to not eat all day long. My husband does this. I'm not going to eat all day long so that I can spend all my calories on the meal and just totally pig out. Well, that might be a good idea in theory, but at that point, your body is basically starving and you just want to get as much food in your mouth as possible, regardless of what it is. And so impulse control goes out the window. Any type of awareness around what you're eating goes out the window. And people tend to overeat, and then you actually feel physically ill. So don't think of, I want to have my holiday meal be this big decadent thing. If you want that, go for it, but make sure you have eaten throughout the day, because the likelihood of that happening, if you've already had substance, is lower. So I really encourage you not to wait until the family meal to eat for the day. And lastly, I would encourage you to avoid sweet treats too close to bedtime. So I'm not saying don't have them, but I would think that anything past usually I will tell people you'll have less of a blood sugar spike if you eat those treats after you've already had a good amount of vegetables and proteins and fats, because they're kind of coming into your digestive tract after you already have that base of foods. So you're not putting them into your gut on an empty stomach, which is going to trigger blood sugar responses. It's kind of melded in there with all those other nutrients that are going to kind of quell that spike. And so sometimes I see people, they'll eat dinner and then 2 hours later, when they've essentially digested everything, then they'll have their cookies. But if you think about it, that's like what we just talked about. You're basically just ingesting glucose. And so the pancreas is reacting to get the blood sugar down, and you're doing this. So avoid the sweet treats too close to bedtime, because it disrupts blood sugar, which then disrupts your sleep. Okay, so third on my list is stick to your routines. So I know that the holidays, it's kind of like senioritis in high school. You're like, oh my gosh, work, we're almost done. We're almost to the end where we can kind of have some playtime, and there's no real schedule. I don't have to get up at the early times to go to work or whatever it is. But it's really important to keep some of your routines in place, because your body is used to those routines. It's used to this circadian rhythm, and so if you have consistent movement in your day, if every morning you get up and walk your dog, continue to do that. If you go to bed usually at 10 p.m. and wake up at 6, try to stick to that as closely as possible. If you have a meditation routine that you do regularly, try to stick to that. So even if your diet is a little bit off because of the holidays, which is understandable, sticking to these other routines will make it easier for you to kind of get back into regular life when we are past the new year. Okay, and lastly, guilt is not invited to the party. So I know it's very easy to think like, to sit there and stew like, oh God, I had 2 pieces of pie and I had, a few cookies last night and my sugar overload is out of control. Well, when you're thinking about those things and you're actually creating stress in your body, and stress actually causes inflammation and causes negative responses in the body. So when you're feeling guilty, you're basically triggering that all of that negativity. So allow yourself to savor this time and to really enjoy, and just be a little mindful about balancing your plate, and not eating your treats too late or on an empty stomach. But don't worry about if you're overindulging a little bit. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be enjoying and loving our time with our family and reveling in this beautiful food. And so guilt is not invited to your party. So just remember that will add the stress, and we don't need that. All right, so here are some of my favorite ingredient swaps for cooking. And I kind of stuck to the basics. If any of you have questions about other alternatives, you're always welcome to email Stevie and she can pass it along to me, or you can go to my website and get a hold of me, whatever is easier for you. So firstly, we have cooking fats. And for high heat things, I always lean toward grass-fed butter, ghee, coconut oil, tallow, or lard. These are saturated fats. They won't go rancid at high heats. So they're the best to use for that kind of thing, like baking or anything where you're using really high degrees of heat. A lot of times people will want to cook these things in olive oil. And the problem with olive oil is it's a beautiful fat, but it's very, very delicate. And so if it is cooked on too high of levels, it can start to turn and go rancid. And so we really want to be mindful of the types of fats that we're using when we're cooking. A good medium heat oil is avocado oil. So sometimes I'll use this in my sometimes if I want to use it in a pan, I will, but I'll use it in my oh shoot, what am I trying to think of? Air fryer. I'll use this in my air fryer, and then low to no heat. So I usually use olive oil as in dressings and stuff like that. And if I'm using something very low cook, like if it's on the lowest end, I'll sometimes add it in. But typically I use it just as like as a dressing or something like that. Okay, so I know not everybody's gluten-free, and that's totally a personal choice. I am, only because I find that it is inflammatory in my system. So some of my favorite gluten-free flours, one of my all-time favorites is this Bob's Red Mill Paleo flour, and I'm almost positive it's a 1-to-1 ratio for baking. So it's a great alternative because you don't have to blend different flours to come up with like a cup of regular flour kind of thing. If you want to do something like that, there's almond, tapioca, arrowroot, cassava, coconut. Usually those have to be blended. So for instance, you'd have like a cup of almond flour with a 1/4 cup of tapioca flour and maybe a tablespoon of coconut. So sometimes those need to be used in conjunction with one another to achieve the same goal. There are many resources online though that can help you with that conversion. And so these are just some of my favorite alternatives. Okay, sugar swaps. I know this is kind of a big one for this community because sugar is very inflammatory, and typically we want to steer clear of it. But again, we're in the holidays. Guilt isn't invited. One of my new favorites is allulose. And it's a sugar substitute, but it doesn't spike blood sugar. And it actually is a lot less sweet tasting than monk fruit, because monk fruit is another alternative, but sometimes it tastes it's all preference, but sometimes to me it tastes a little too chemically, or there's something, it's like too sweet for me. So I've really liked the allulose because it's a lot more subtle. It doesn't have any kind of blood sugar issues with it. And it's just I believe it's also a 1-to-1. So it's a really great substitute. Coconut sugar is another one that the glycemic load is not as high as like cane sugar. So it's another good alternative. Date sugar as well. And then maple syrup, sugar is sugar. So maple syrup is still a sugar. It's still going to create some type of blood sugar spike. The difference with maple syrup is there are some redemptive qualities. So if you're just using refined cane sugar, there's no redemptive nutrient qualities. And with maple syrup, there is. So, if you're using a little bit of it, great. It's not going to ruin your day. And then some of my milk alternatives, and these are, again, totally bio-individual. If you do fine with dairy, I would encourage full fat milk or full fat cream if you're going with dairy. Those fats are fantastic for all your cells. But if you're like me and you have a little bit more sensitivity to dairy, I cook a lot with almond milk. My favorite brands are Three Trees and Malk. And then organic full fat coconut milk. And I just get the canned coconut milk. And I love both of those options for cooking. They work great. Okay, that is it.